thank you all for being here this wonderful afternoon and in this great room. You've got this fabulous view of the city, views of the whole North Shore. It's somehow symbolic that we're all here talking about this region, one you can visually see it around us. I am happy on behalf of the Interfaith Housing Center of the Northern Suburbs to welcome you. You are the witnesses to a new chapter in the history of the Interfaith Housing Center of the Northern Suburbs. And before I say a few words, I'm going to say a few words and you'll hear from the speakers. I wanted to recognize some very important, you're all very important, but some key people with the organization. I'd like the staff of the Interfaith Housing Center to stand and wave. These are the people who make things happen every day. And I would like to also recognize the Board of Directors. The Board of Directors, please stand. We strategically have board and staff dispersed around so you can talk to all of us. And I would also like to recognize former board members who are here to share in this occasion. If the former board members, some of whom are founders, please stand. Thank you. And so, who are we? We are a housing justice organization born out of the civil rights movement of the 1960s, when a group of local women and clergy, some of whom are here, most notably Reverend Paul Allen, was of the Winnetka Congregational Church, inspired, even before our founding in 1972, inspired by the Mississippi Summer Project's grassroots interracial voter registration push, formed the North Shore Summer Project to integrate our communities. They brought Dr. King to inspire thousands of us on the Winnetka Village Green in 1965 to, quote, live together as brothers or perish as fools. And we, the Interfaith Housing Center, are that legacy. We have always been ahead of the curve in 5 important ways. 1, we organize out of a progressive sense of altruism, not a narrow sense of self-interest. We organize for communities that are diverse, inclusive, integrated, not necessarily because there's something in it for us, but because we feel that's what we want our communities to be. It may be out of a sense of faith, out of a sense of what is right in any sense or way, shape, or form, but we believe that. So we have always organized out of this both self-interest and altruism. Second, as a fair housing organization, we are different. We're not just dedicated to investigating discrimination complaints as they arise, or using the legal apparatus to open housing markets. But we recognize that income is as much a barrier to living in the northern suburbs as discrimination. So we are unique in that we deal with affordable as well as fair housing. Thirdly, which touches a little bit on the first point, we have had a faith orientation, knowing that housing justice is morally right. It's not just sound policy. I don't know if any of you read the New York Times this morning with Joseph Stiglitz talking about the divide between the rich and the poor. He was trying to appeal to people who might not be touched by the moral argument and say, you know, it's not even good for our economy. It's not good for our long-term growth to have this divide. But we start from, it's just not morally right. And in fact, Reverend Paul Allen, in his letter of invitation to the conference that founded us almost 40 years to the day, 1972 October, he talked about our, quote, ecumenical and humane spirit in coming together. Fourthly, from day one, we were always about working with others. We, again, quoting from a founding document, we coordinate the efforts of the religious community with various secular organizations also concerned about the problem of exclusion, such as the League of Women Voters and others. So we pride ourselves in our collaborative spirit. And finally, fifth, we combine services with advocacy. Not everybody does this. So, for example, we have a home sharing program where we match people looking for affordable housing with someone with an extra room. We investigate discrimination complaints. We provide counseling for foreclosure prevention. We handle virtually all the landlord-tenant complaints in the North Suburban region. So we do all those services, and we pride ourselves also if people just call, looking for housing. We don't necessarily find them a 2-bedroom apartment, but we can point them in the right direction. So we do those services on a daily basis, but we also do organizing and advocacy. So, for example, I think we're probably the first group to really use organizing as an effective fair housing strategy, for example, with the Skokie taxi cab drivers who, a few years ago, a law was passed not permitting drivers who had their cabs lived in the community. They couldn't even park on the street. They couldn't park in their driveways. Is that a fair housing issue? Well, if you can't park here, you can't have a job. I mean, if you can't, then you have to move. If you don't move, you lose your job. It was a fair housing issue, and we worked together collaboratively with a couple of organizations, Council of Islamic Organizations and the American Friends Service Committee, to help organize the workers, and the village did come to a compromise on that. And we've done that in other campaigns we're doing as well. So 40 years to the month since our inception at a similarly well-attended summit, the Inclusive Community Challenge to Church and Synagogue, we gather together. We take a fresh look at what's happening around us. Are individuals who want to move into our communities treated with equal respect, regardless of their race, religion, country of origin, disability, income, or other label? Are our communities more integrated than they were in 1972? And where they are more diverse, are people of color and others who have been disenfranchised in the past actually encouraged to stay here once they have a foothold here? And finally, are our strategies at Interfaith effective in promoting all of the above? So what are we seeing? Income is more of a barrier than ever. The income divide that's endemic to the nation is even more striking here. I would estimate that what we talk about, the 1% nationally, probably that's in this region, maybe that's 20%. We have a lot of the 1%ers here, and a lot of people on the other end. And as a corollary, while formal structures of discrimination are illegal, such as deed restrictions against selling your homes to a person of a certain race or religion, we have other structures that uphold segregation, such as funding, school funding by zip code, that essentially rewards or punishes children based on the underlying wealth of their community, which in our racially segregated region also has a disparate racial impact. Another is zoning against multifamily housing and generally discouraging rental housing. The latest, by the way, and that is this crime-free housing fashion or phase. I was in a meeting recently where an officer from another suburb, not one of these, said to our little landlord-tenant task force that not all renters are criminals, but all criminals are renters. And I couldn't believe nobody batted an eye on that. Right? And with those income and structural barriers to access, our public transportation systems are not all commensurate to the population and job growth in our suburbs. Our supports to new immigrants are inadequate. Services for seniors wanting to age in place are stressed, especially in the state economy. And we have virtually nothing for adolescents and teens. We have gotten more diverse from about 1 in 4 so from about 1 in 10 people of color in 1980 to 1 in 4 now. But for African Americans, they're still barely 2% of the northern suburbs if you don't count Evanston in the equation. And people are not necessarily happy about the diversity. So there's not necessarily an acceptance of it. But we also, on the positive end, see great opportunity. There's generally greater understanding and appreciation for difference, and there's creativity in the suburbs. There's some new groups, and I'm going to mention those in a moment. So mirroring this, Interfaith has been called upon others to expand the kind of work we do over the decade because of all these myriad issues. So I remember it all started for me. I've been on staff since '93, but in '99, when there were those hate shootings, when Ricky Birdsong was killed, many of you may have remembered, simply for walking while black with his family. It galvanized, we helped to galvanize the community. Clergy contacted us, we contacted them, we pulled together a meeting to talk about hate crimes. Well, what do hate crimes have to do with housing? But ultimately, we helped, and Lorelai's here, we helped relate religious leaders acting together for equality to look at hate crimes, racial profiling, and what's being taught in the schools. And came up with a joint statement about ultimately dwelling together side by side is the answer. Then a year later, racial profiling, the mother of a police officer in Island Park ran into our office with heavy binders saying, my son is one of the officers who's outing the Highland Park police about practices of racial profiling. Can you help? Okay, well, we actually helped to connect them with a congregation in Glencoe to do a big rally, and Operation Push was involved, but we got involved in racial profiling. We also, with North Shore Estates now, for Sheridan Place in Highwood, Morton Grove Motels, Sunset Village Manufactured Housing Community in Glenview, and also the Skokie cab drivers, there was also this undercurrent of we don't want riffraff or working class people here. So again, not a protected class, but so what do we do with this? Also with this, the issue of employment. When you can't live here, you can't work either. It was also a mind opener. Alicia's here when we had a meeting where some young high school students from Highland Park High School were talking about not feeling safe or comfortable walking in the community. Young Latina, some girls who felt they were being followed by cops, afraid of deportation. Again, where does that fit in? And yet they're coming to us. When Reverend Meeks came to do a rally at New Trier High School to protest school funding by zip code, people contacted us. Can you organize a welcome movement for this? And that became a campaign, United We Learn. Lake County approached us about transportation, Latinos and transportation. We want to hear from Latinos and what their transportation needs are. Can you help us organize a forum? Which brings me back to Interfaith and all of us in this room on October 28th, 2012. Today, we're here to find common ground and inspiration for just communities moving into the future. We're here to remind ourselves of the deepest principles of morality and justice that animate us. We've always been about action. Again, I loved finding some statements of principles and faith from our founding. Reverend Allen had himself written, he said, our religious faith, this is a quote, won't let us escape responsibility for seeing and helping. And then he quoted, inasmuch as you did it unto one of the least of these, you did it unto me. And Rabbi Harold Kudan, who was also one of our first presidents of the organization, quoted from the Psalms, behold, how good and pleasant it is for brothers to dwell together. And he said, our response should be patterned after the words of Isaiah, who told the worshipers that God was not satisfied with prayer alone. What God expected of the people was to shelter the homeless, feed the hungry, and clothe the naked. So we were founded, as Reverend Allen phrased, to provide an ongoing vehicle for the expression of religious concern for more inclusive communities and the provision of housing for persons of moderate and low incomes. That's from our 1972. So today, where do we hear that, quote, expression for more concern for more inclusive communities? Well, we're hearing it in addition to congregations. We're hearing it emanating from beyond to so many new groups like Latinos in Skokie. I know Dan is here. Can you raise your hand? Dan, Latinos in Skokie. There was a group, Evanston Housing for All, in Sue Carlson. They came together briefly. Winnetka is Neighborly. And I know there are a few people here. United We Learn, the education justice group I mentioned. The Niles Township Parent ELL Center, which maybe while not grassroots, is really about schools coming together and saying, we need to do something for, we have the fastest growing immigrant population in Niles Township and the whole Chicago area. We need to do something for our parents to help our kids. And Corey Wallace, who's also on our board, is the director. Friends for Health in Lake County, that was a group that tried to get a clinic for Latinos in Highland Park, Highwood. I don't know if there are any Friends for Health people here. North Shore Village, Helen Gagel. That's an effort, yes, to help seniors to age in place through building community. JJ's List, another group that has, and I know Debbie DePalma is here, and that's a group that's made like almost a good housekeeping seal of approval for all stores that are disability friendly in our suburbs. So we have people who are churched and unchurched, concerned about the education of our children, the health care of our immigrant populations, and the housing of our workforce. So we find and share with you today that there's more to a welcoming community than simply an open door. Someone has to usher you in with warmth and alacrity. The door has to be wide enough to accommodate your wheelchair. You need a way to get into the door if you don't have a car to get to the door. When the door is closed because you're at work, your children need a place to go after school. When you're bringing groceries through the door, you also need markets or food pantries that carry your culture's food. When you want to step out of that door in an evening to have a good time, you need restaurants and cultural activities that speak to your palate, your language, and your traditions. On behalf of the Board of Directors and the staff of the Interfaith Housing Center of the Northern Suburbs, I am here to tell you that we have listened to you. It is with great enthusiasm and honor that I announce to you that today the Interfaith Housing Center of the Northern Suburbs becomes Open Communities. So open means we want our communities to be open to all. It is an expression of principled action. To bring back Reverend Allen's words, we cannot escape responsibility for seeing and helping. We know that beyond enforcement of anti-discrimination laws, the new fair housing frontier is local infrastructure to meet the diverse needs, complemented by genuinely welcoming attitudes. And we ourselves, as an incorporated agency and an agency for change, expand our membership to build political will in all 16 suburbs and beyond for open communities. So we warmly invite you to join us on our continued collective journey. And by the way, if you have handheld, is Ann here? Do they work?
Not yet.
Not quite yet? Well, you're going to be able to get right on our website, whether you're on a little handheld device or your computer, open-communities.org. Margaret Mead is famous for having said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." And that's what I've seen at my 19 years at Interfaith. A few people changed the course of Mallinckrodt and Wilmette, put affordable housing as the top community development priority in Northbrook, where it was absent, made shopping in disability-friendly stores a prize seal of approval, and one Winnetka tenant just last year spearheaded the village to assume formal responsibility for holding all landlords accountable. So, like us on Facebook, become a member, tell your neighbors, work on a campaign. We've got some green forms, our new color, and we want you to fill those out. We have baskets, what you would like to do to promote this movement. And my dream for the 19 years I've been the agency's director has been to create a broad-based movement reminiscent of the North Shore Summer Project, in which each and every person on the North Shore can become an ambassador of welcome, a card-carrying member of ours who's willing to extend a hand to a stranger and hold all elected officials accountable for preserving or bringing about open communities. So with that, I am going to turn this over to, we have two fabulous speakers who are going to help us think about, frame this new direction of ours. We have Dawn Turner Trice of the Chicago Tribune, who did a fabulous job of covering our United We Learn video, and I knew reading your story, you got it, that there are people here on the North Shore who want to change the connotation of North Shore from elite to welcoming. And Alan Ray, who has done a phenomenal job in 4 years at Elmhurst College of building a culture of engagement and appreciation for inclusiveness.